Welcome to the Mojo Podcast with me, Richard Stokes. Now, before we get into this week's episode, I just want to say an enormous thank you for the reaction to the very first episode which went out last week. I mean, it was truly amazing and hugely gratifying, and it seems that the podcast has really struck a chord with many of you. You said it resonated, it was honest and even inspiring, and that's exactly what we're aiming for with the Mojo Podcast, so thank you. I'm not entirely sure how these things work, but one UK podcast chart has the Mojo Podcast in the top 20 for mental health. That's incredible in one episode, so thank you very much. So all those subscriptions, 5-star ratings and reviews that you're leaving are having a huge impact and allowing the podcast to be more discoverable. So thank you so much. So for episode 2 of the Mojo Podcast, I was back in the City of London meeting Bree Verity, the founder of Arc Storytelling. Now, I met Bree a little while ago to discuss some potential work, and I was immediately struck by both her story and her expertise as a storyteller, which will be a recurring theme of the Mojo Podcast. Experts in their field with their own Mojo stories. So I immediately asked her to be one of my first guests, and thankfully she said yes. We talk about her own Mojo story, how despite achieving great success as a consultant in the IT industry, that she knew something was missing, and how actually a piece of misfortune allowed her some unexpected time to dream up and launch her new business. Bree offers a huge amount of wisdom, inspiration and tips for how you can own your own story, which is certainly key to your mojo. It was a joy to chat to Bree, and she has generously offered a discount on one of her products to Mojo listeners, so please do keep listening to the very end to hear that offer. As ever, the holy trinity of subscribing, rating and reviewing is massively helpful, and maybe we can, stay in that top 20 or even go a little bit higher up next week. So with no further ado, here is Bree Verity. Hi Bree, great to see you.
Hi Richard, how are you?
I'm very well
Good.
actually. And how are you? How's your mojo today?
Oh, actually very good. I was thinking about this question before. It's a Monday afternoon and it's starting to get dark in London, but I'm a pretty positive person, so I would say maybe 8 out of 10.
Great, so you're a glass half full person versus half empty.
Yeah, I try to be. I think attitude has a lot to play in how we perceive ourselves and the world around us. And, if we can try to maintain kind of a steady keel, it really helps us.
And what does, I'm asking everyone this question, what does mojo mean to you?
Well, I think it's about kind of that intrinsic thing that's almost like your spirit and your personality combined. And so it really does define who you are and your behavior on a day-to-day basis. And, if people say, oh, I'm suffering, my mojo's suffering, it's almost like there's a bit of their spirit that's missing or that they're trying to work through and, they need to find themselves again. So I think it's really very much an intrinsic part of who you are and what defines you.
Great. So thanks for agreeing to be on the Mojo Podcast. As I've said up in the intro, you've got a fabulous story that we're going to get into. And I thought we'd start by just kind of stepping back, and storytelling is very much your thing, and we'll get into that in terms of what you're doing with Arc. But could you maybe take us a few years back to years growing up in Canada and how you got from there to the City of London where we are today?
Yeah, certainly. So, I grew up in Canada, and it was a town of about 1 million people, but it felt quite big at the time. It's not compared to London now, is it? But I had a really stable and happy home life, one younger brother, and I was very much into drama when I was growing up and performing, and I wanted to be an actress. And my parents were teachers, and they wanted me to do something a bit more stable and standard, that I wouldn't have to be the poor, starving church mouse trying to get my next job. So we settled on broadcasting and public relations as kind of a halfway compromise, so that I would have a stable job, but I'd still get to perform. And I found I did a 2-year broadcasting degree, and then I was on air in a very small town of about 150,000 people viewing audience, and I was doing the weather and reporting. And the part I liked the best was getting to know people's stories and understanding why they did what they did and where they came from. So the story behind the film that we were making usually, or the feature that we were developing. So a lot of times I'd have to do the story that I was asked to do about maybe whatever it was, the barn building. And then I wanted to meet that person afterwards and kind of understand, where they came from and their heritage and their history. And that followed me through my whole life, that wanting to know. And, even today, if I'm at a bar or a restaurant, it's funny how I just get talking to strangers because I'm so interested, whoever it is, about what makes them tick.
Yeah.
And that's followed throughout. It's a theme that's running throughout my life.
So this natural inquisitiveness has kind of always been there for you.
Curiosity and learning from other people. I think everyone has something to give or to share and impart. And, that knowledge, you don't have time in your life to try to learn everything for yourself. And it's the best way to actually learn through others and then make that connection. That's really important to me as well. Because we are, especially in London, we are surrounded by people all the time. And so if you feel like that is a barrier to your own development, then you're going to suffer. Or, if you feel bitter because people are always with you and you don't have the space you need to think. So you have to adjust and you have to adapt. And I think, it's probably part of a coping mechanism coming from Canada where you're in open spaces and you can go off to the mountains and have your own time and headspace. You don't get that much in London. And so, hopefully I tried to see that as an opportunity. And even, I've been in lots of jobs in my life, contracting, where I haven't chosen who I've been working with. It's not been my choice. So again, trying to have a positive attitude that I'm going to make the most of the people that I'm working with and try to get to know them a little bit better, because it smooths my way and makes it a bit easier for me to be there as well.
Right. And in terms of your environment, you grew up in Canada, this wonderful, large, expansive country. I've only been there once, but to the Rockies, and it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Now you're in London, one of the busiest cities in Europe. Where do you use the word headspace?
Yeah.
Where do you get your headspace now?
Well, I think it is about kind of going internally now. And, even the last 8 months, I think I've done, and even before that, a year before that, I've been through this period of transformation and soul searching, because I think we're constantly re-identifying with our environments and recreating who we are. And so we have to keep finding ways to kind of revalidate, well, who am I? What do I care about? What do I want to be doing with my life? Where am I going to put my energies and my efforts? And for me, I'm a water person, so I love swimming. And so if I can get to the swimming pool, even if it's just once or twice a week, that is my headspace, because it's very therapeutic. It's almost like meditation, where you're repeating the same movement. You don't talk to anyone. You're pretty much shut off from the world. And so I think that Londoners and other, people who live in big cities like we do, they need to find that avenue and that outlet where they can shut off and they can be quiet for a while instead of having the buzzing thoughts through their head continuously or having to talk to people all of the time.
Yeah.
So that's what works for me.
So finding your element was important for you.
Yeah, and that's doing something that you can carry wherever you go. So I like traveling, and I want something that's sustainable. So if I'm in Canada, I can do it. If I'm in London, you can find a swimming pool anywhere. When we were in Argentina, there's swimming pools, right? You can or swim in the river or the lake or whatever's nearby. And I think that's the thing, is making it so there's no barriers to entry. It's something you can go and do immediately. You don't need to set it up in advance. It can be spontaneous. But whenever you need it, you can just get your fix and then get back on track.
And do you feel, coming back to your mojo and your description of it, is your spirit, if you're not doing, for example, that habitual action of swimming regularly, what are you starting to feel?
Yeah, well, I think I just try to find other outlets to release that energy that may not be so positive. So, that might be going out for a few drinks, which end up being more than just a few, because I know I've got that pent-up energy, but I've not released it in a more positive way. But I do start to get quite anxious and feel out of control, because it feels like decisions are being made onto me or done to me, instead of me being the driver of my path, and me being in the kind of in control in the driver's seat.
Right. And talk to me a bit about kind of being in a level of control and kind of setting out on your career. You're studying broadcast and journalism in Canada. You came over to the UK. Where did that start to take you? Yeah,
so I ended up doing change management, which is basically usually for big projects, IT projects, and it's working with business stakeholders to try to help them along that journey of change. So it's, engaging with them early and thinking about how you want to communicate with them, and how they might need additional skills or support to be able to then accept that change and move on and then make that part of their daily lives and their behavior. So even though it had an IT element to it, it's still very interesting, because I've always tried to incorporate that storytelling and that narrative. Why are you doing this? Why does it matter to you? Why is it important to the company? And I think all of the projects that I've been able to kind of be successful in the past have that element of storytelling around it. You know what the vision is, you know who the leadership is, you buy into them, you know what they're trying to do. So you have a sense of where are we now in the roadmap and where are we going to. And that's all about the same basic principles of storytelling, which is what we're hardwired to pay attention to and to resonate with. Even children, that's how we learn and share knowledge when we're children. And that carries on well into our adult lives. It's how we like to be able to pick up on those key elements of things that we need to pay attention to and then remember afterwards as well.
In the position that you were in terms of asking these great questions, you used all the fabulous why, what, how questions, and you're talking to the leadership of organisations. Did that give you a sense of, I don't know, a sort of an element of a control? Because you're kind of in there and understanding the organisation really well?
Yeah, sometimes, but sometimes not. Because, if you're thinking about a senior leadership team, they all have their own backgrounds, their own levels of skill in terms of whether they think communicating is even important or whether it's a command and control sort of environment where we will just tell you what to do and you'll get on and you'll accept that. And I think I have worked in quite a few organizations that are like that. And so breaking down those barriers and asking leadership to be more vulnerable and not to have all the answers and having to say, okay, I need to work with you, team. I'm not an expert in everything. And I'm going to actually bring you along on the journey and instead of just dropping you into it at the end. So I think I've just had, it's been a huge learning curve for me to see where people are coming from individually. And when you talk about organizational change, it's always down to the individual to see how they feel about change first before you're going to implement something that they'll accept.
And have you seen a change in that, they use that word vulnerability in terms of where senior management are. Have you seen a change in that? Are people more open to expressing that? I might not have all the answers here.
Yeah, it really just depends. I think still it's on a very individual level, and you can have a really good boss. You can probably think back to a few years yourself where you're like, I really loved working for that person. I would do anything for them. I stood behind them 100%. Sometimes they didn't make the best decisions, but we knew we could pick it up and run with it because I liked them and I respected them and they had integrity. And I think, again, I'd love to say that's across the board. I think people are realizing now, if they want to be able to communicate, especially cross-generational, they need to change their behaviors. It's not command and control anymore. People have a lot more choices. They'll just pick up and go elsewhere if they don't like the message. And I think that our society is just like that now anyway. We have so many choices. People just don't put up with it. And it's quite interesting, some of the millennials I've been working with lately, they're so much more conscious about, what am I working for an ethical company? Where do the outputs go? What am I contributing to? Does this fit with my purpose overall? I mean, these weren't questions I was asking when I was 20. But I think that leadership needs to get on board and recognize that because people just think differently now. And they're not going to stay around in the same career forever. People move around a lot more than they used to.
So two big themes coming out of there for me, what you're saying in terms of choice and change.
Yeah.
So you've made a choice to do something different. Can you tell us a little bit about what led up to that, and then we'll get more into what you're doing now.
Sure.
But there must have been a pivot point somewhere.
Very much so, yeah. I think it's funny, the story of ARC begins, like a lot of these stories do, admit a period of transformation for me. And I think on paper, I was contracting and I had the perfect job. It was a big, large corporate with a massive team that reported to me, a great pay packet, and all the kudos that I craved. And I've been thinking a lot about this in the last year because it's the story we tell ourselves, and I think this is quite an interesting theme. And for me, my identity was based around having that big job, having a team reporting to me, and people seeing that I was in this role. That was my job first, family second, and I've always thought that. And that comes from a lot of different things growing up, being quite ambitious, being driven, thinking that it wouldn't be good enough until I got to X. And so I had to kind of unpick all of that if I was going to move on from that job. But let me go through the journey a little bit first.
Please, yes.
So basically, I kind of got to this point and I found out I was not happy, which surprised me. I assumed that once I got to this point in my career where I knew what I was doing and people were coming to me for advice and guidance, and I was a manager, that I would be very happy with that and satisfied, and I wasn't. I found I was stressed and anxious, and I was having lots of bad dreams. I wasn't sleeping through the night. And all of this negativity was spilling over into my home life in a way I'd never experienced before. And then I thought, okay, well, you know what? This must be me. I'm the problem here. I need to get better at coping. But that led me on to this journey of, okay, well, how can I do that? What's it going to take? I'm not able to do it myself, so I need to get some help. So I got a life coach, and then I took a mindfulness course, and all of these things. I was just trying at different avenues to try to help myself cope in the situation where I really was struggling. And I felt I couldn't quit. I've never been in a situation like that where I just felt like it was so important for me to stay there even though I was unhappy, because I'd be letting people down. And that wasn't my story. That's not what I did. So I was willing to sacrifice myself for that, to continue to tell that same narrative. But then I went skiing, and this was half term last year in February. And the first day I was on the slopes, and I injured my foot. And I injured it so badly I couldn't ski for the rest of the holiday. It was a sprained muscle, I think, or something like that. But it just was so painful. I couldn't even put a boot on it. So I was quite disappointed.
So skiing was out then?
No way. And I was really disappointed because I'd built myself up to, we're going to have a great holiday. This is downtime. It would be wonderful. But what it did allow me to do was stop. And I'm so restless in that job and moving around and trying to solve problems and issues that I had to just stop. And I spent the next 3 days in the Spanish sunshine on the top of this amazing ski hill. It was about 25 degrees, sitting in there in my shades, couldn't do anything else. And I had to think. I had time to contemplate what was wrong. My current situation was making me unhappy. What was I going to do about it? And I went through this whole thing. What was wrong with me? I wouldn't quit and desert, I'm going to stay there no matter what. I'm not a quitter. I'm a trooper, all of this. And then I just came to the conclusion that, well, is this really worth it? I mean, it's a job. It's a job. It's not, it doesn't define who I am. There's so much more to me than just a job.
So you had, out of this misfortune of this accident that happened on this long, look forward to ski trip, you get time. You're given time back, which we're kind of, short of, for sure.
Yeah.
But you decided to use it in a certain way. I think that's really interesting because there's other distractions. There's so many distractions available to us right now. But you wanted to almost self-diagnose how you'd got to where you'd got to.
Yeah. Well, I just felt like I tried a bunch of other things that were external. And I do feel that we have the answers within us. And I feel I've really experienced that a lot more in the last 8 months. But if we allow ourselves some time and some headspace again, and just stop panicking and worrying and running around like headless chickens, and just give ourselves a bit of time back, just to reflect, And it was interesting because there's one part of that job I really liked, and it was talking to graduates as part of an intern program, and they were coming in and getting interviewed to be part of this massive big project team. And a lot of them, they're just out of uni, so they had a lot of experiences, but not maybe on paper and not in an office environment. And they were finding it very difficult to talk about how they could apply themselves to this new environment. And I got to meet this really great guy who ended up working in my team, Ben, and he and I ended up working on his story card, which were all the things that he had done in his life that he wouldn't put in a CV or a resume, but which helped define who he was, the type of person he was, his skills, what he was good at, what he wanted to do.
And this is what the story card is?
Yeah. It's almost like your personal and professional specialisms and what makes you different, what differentiates you from someone else. And not only what you're good at, but what you like doing too, or what you want to do more of. And I loved that idea. And then I thought, you know what? Everyone needs a story card at some stage in their lives, just to be able to remind themselves how far have they come in their life? What are some of the things that they should have celebrated, even if they didn't? And where do they want to go next? And so, that was something that I really ruminated about. And I thought, well, could I do that full time? Would people feel that this was something of value for them?
And?
Yeah, and so
that's where we are.
That's where I am today. I've developed a consultancy which very much does that. We sit down with people and we talk about their life's journey and their story. And that's why we called it ARC, because it's the arc of a story, almost like a narrative that you would read in literature. But I thought it's really interesting because we do have these common threads and themes that run throughout our lives. And it's almost like they're things that we need to pay more attention to, I think, because they keep defining who we are. And they're pulled through in so many different ways. And I found that it's an hour-long consultation that we're doing with people, but there's insights that they were drawing out themselves that they'd never thought of before because they didn't have the time and headspace just to sit down and think, where have I been? What do I want? What am I good at? What do I want to do more of? And it's been very interesting. So I've been doing this now for 8 months, and I've had about 50 clients. And the themes that keep coming out again and again. What is my purpose? How do I contribute to the world? Who do I want to be? How do I, I've had 25 years of industry. How do I recreate myself now to do something different, maybe to give back or contribute or to be a mentor? And I just read an amazing book called The 100-Year Life. And it's talking about how we live longer. We work for a longer period of time. No one retires now at 55 or 65 to 65. So that means we're constantly recreating ourselves. And that's why it's so imperative to know what story we want to tell ourselves and other people, because that is the cornerstone. It's almost the purpose that guides us and can guide our decisions. And, so I felt it's just been an amazing experience for me to be able to hear other people's stories and start to see these patterns emerge. We're not so different, all of us. We want the same things fundamentally.
So that from that unfortunate incident in Spain to working with this graduate to creation of this idea, this product that happened. But what allowed you? What gave you maybe the confidence that yes, I can go and do this?
Honestly, it's been the biggest roller coaster of my life, because especially if you've never been a small business owner before, it's different than contracting. You don't have a network of people you can rely on to ask questions or, to figure out information. You have to go seek out a brand new network. And I think that is a really important thing that I never recognized before I started on this. But it has been amazing for me, the people I've met and how we've helped each other and the partnerships I'm working on now. So I can't say it was just, oh yes, I'm 100% committed to it, but I can't say that it's been an easy journey, because there's constantly self-doubt that enters your thoughts. Because you're like, well, should I be doing this? Is this valuable? Is it a waste of my time? Do people think it's good? Are they going to use it? And I think that you have to recognize that you will go through a whole bunch of that up and down sort of roller coaster ride of emotions when you're starting out a new business or a project. And that's normal. And it's about the network that you try to surround yourself with that are hopefully supportive people that you can call on.
And I wanted to ask you about that. So in terms of network, allies, who are these people that have helped you maybe with this mojo of getting it back through launching ARC?
Yeah, well, I've been really lucky and fortunate because my husband is a serial entrepreneur, so he has definitely been a guiding force and a rock for me when I've been thinking, I'm going to quit. This is awful, No one's getting back to me in my, my email approaches, or I don't know if I've done this person justice in their story card, or if I've been able to help them today. So he has been really instrumental in just telling me to keep going, And there's been other people like that have either had their own businesses or friends of mine that are trying to get going on their own projects. And I think we've just started to form a bit of an alliance. And we have regular meetings where we just update each other on what we're doing. And again, it's been very interesting to see the synergies. So how can I help you? How can you help me? Can we work together? Let's create one list of even PR contacts that have crossover between our projects. So we're not duplicating effort and work. So we're just trying to help each other move forward as much as we can do through supporting each other.
So this informal networks that you're building as you go, and as we said just before we started recording, just meeting lots of interesting people through this work.
Yeah, and I feel, again, so privileged that I get to hear people's stories and, learn from them. And I feel like I'm on an accelerated path of learning just because of this project I've decided to commit my time to. I feel like just everything is picking up and happening so fast now. And, I will have, this is another great piece of advice from another serial entrepreneur I know, have 100 conversations with 100 people just because. No intent. No, it's not a sales pitch. You're not trying to sell them something. And that has been one of the best pieces of advice because it's allowed me to open up and not be so driven about money or driven about my time, because you don't know where conversations are going to lead. And that person, if you can connect with them, which is the whole intent of this kind of storytelling business, then, in 6 months' time, they might ring you up and say, by the way, guess what? I talked to someone who might help you. Or, you know what, I could do with your help. Or can I buy your services for my grandmother because I want to create a book for her? So there's all sorts of things. The universe kind of opens itself up when you've got the right attitude and you're looking with your eyes wide open instead of half shut, which we do when we're into, the daily grind sometimes.
Well, I guess that's it. If we're in the 9 to 5, we're in the corporate lifestyle. I say 9 to 5. It's longer than 9 to 5. He works till 5, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that ability to sit back, take a look around, have those conversations you wouldn't normally be having seems to be important.
Yeah, but I think everyone should do that, whether you're wanting to transform in a big way or just have a bit of a better life. I mean, we are constantly surrounded by strangers. But why do they have to remain strangers? I mean, all it is saying, hi, how's it going? And people are fairly friendly in London. I don't know if it's just the North American accent and they think I'm crazy, but people will mostly have a conversation with you. And I think, London's a very friendly place, and people just don't necessarily give it the time.
I think it has a bad rap for being,
because
it's big and people in a rush, less friendly than maybe they'd like to be. But I think there's something you said about you go and initiate a conversation. When you start something, as I said, there's 8 million stories out there that people want to tell. Yeah.
And I think everyone has a good story to tell, like an important story for you to know about, or you can glean something from that and learn something from that. And you can't learn everything just yourself as an individual anymore, because there's just too much information out there. We're bombarded. But I also feel like it's been amazing, the people that I have been able to meet and had the opportunity to tell their stories and help them with that. They all have, this wanting to help and connect and help others, wanting to make the world a better place, doing massive, big social impact projects. And I'm not sure if that's just, this is the way it happens when you're opening yourself up. But I have been so blessed by the people I've met. And I think it's just because I put it out there to the universe and said, I'm ready for this now. My eyes are open. What's on offer? I'm looking, I'm ready. I'm ready to accept what you're going to bring to me. And I think that attitude is really important.
And so this change of career, this finding your own path, focusing on storytelling, clearly had a big effect on your mojo, it seems to me. How about on people you're working with, when I'm quite intrigued about when they're telling their stories, what happens to them?
Yeah. Well, I've been quite surprised, to be honest, that a lot of people don't spend any time on self-development. I mean, it's a $3 billion industry in the US and growing. And I'm not sure if it's just different here, but a lot of people have said, you know what, I've just not had an hour to talk about myself, where, it's impartial, unjudged, I can just say whatever I think, whatever I'm feeling. And I've never celebrated those small things that maybe I should have. I've never seen how far I've come from where I started. And I've never thought about where I'm going next. And I think, again, you have the answers inside you, and that's what they're recognizing. Oh, I can do that. I do a bit of a visualization as part of the consultation. And it's really fascinating. It's basically, do we have the time for this? It's going through. So you're going through a house, and there's a box on the table. And you're asked to visualize the box and what it looks like and the textures and the colors and if it's got any ornamentation on it. And you open the box and there's a tool inside. And that tool is at your disposal for you to use in any way, shape, or form you want to, but for a task that's intrinsic to your well-being and your livelihood. And so people are thinking this through and, thinking about what's in the box. And then they complete the task using this tool and put the tool back in the box. And they're able to come back to this house and the tool and the object whenever they want to be able to use it again. And resoundingly, the feedback from this exercise is most of the people are finding a key, a crystal ball, but it's all an enabler, or it's a representation that's demonstrating they hold the answers themselves. They know what they need to do, or they have the skills to make it happen or unblock something that's been standing in their way. They just need to have the confidence and the awareness that they can go forward and make things happen.
Yeah, that self-resourcefulness piece absolutely chimes with me and everything that I've looked at myself personally and working with clients now, that we all have the answers within ourselves. It's about finding them. I think that key metaphor is brilliant in terms of just opening the door something else which was always there, but maybe a bit. Sometimes you need a little bit of help to discover it, right?
Yeah, and getting that time to be able to say, okay, I'm ready now for the next step. A lot of the CEOs I'm working with are trying to transition into now, like I said, I want to be a mentor. I want to help startups. I want to impart my knowledge. I want a legacy that I'm going to leave behind. And for them, it's I've got the time and the money, but how do I get into these new networks, and where do I want to focus my energies? And a lot of it is that, them saying, well, I just need to sit down and do that, write that book or work on that project, or just focus my attention and not get distracted. And so even for them, where you think, they've got so much practice in talking about their products and their approaches and their companies, spending time on yourself, people don't do it as much as they should still.
Yeah, amen to that. Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
So, Bree, can you tell us a little bit about how our listeners can find out more about what you're doing with ARC?
Yeah. So I have a website, and it's ARC, storytelling.com. And that shows kind of what we offer and the different packages that are available. And my email address is on there as well. And we'll also be showcasing some videos in the next coming months, which will be looking at some of the people I've interviewed, talking about their amazing stories and the projects that they're working on. And then also some hints and tips about how you can start to create your own story. Because I'm really trying to think about ways that people can do this, that it's not intimidating or overwhelming, but in kind of bite-sized chunks that actually are practical and make a big difference. So we'll be having some kind of mini tutorials on the website as well.
Fabulous. And I'll share all those website details and all your social links, etc., on the show notes that you'll see underneath the podcast. So I have one more question for you, if that's okay, if you've got a little bit more time. And we kind of started with this one at the beginning when you talked about swimming, maybe.
Yeah.
But I'm really intrigued into what are the maybe 3 things that are in your routine every day that really help with your mojo?
Yeah. Swimming, definitely, that is one of 3. And it's just very much grounding me and helping me get back on track. So I do that as much as I can. And the other 2, surprisingly, I love sleep. And I always thought, sleep in the morning, and then you've got that extra bit of time in the bed. But the last 2 months, I've been getting up half an hour early. And it has made a huge difference to my life. I'm not rushing around. I get more time with my family. We eat breakfast together. The children are telling me things they wouldn't tell me in the evening because they're too tired to talk about those sorts of things. It's setting the day and setting it up right in a way where we all feel like we can go off in our own directions and we're still connected. And that has made a huge difference. And it's only 30 minutes, but honestly. And the other one is reading before I go to bed. So just again, so it's kind of that setting in the morning, setting the day right, and then when I go to sleep, having some time to just chill, relax, and reflect, and get into some good books.
What are you reading right now?
So actually, I'm reading Sherlock Holmes, just because I'm quite fascinated by the whole powers of deduction and inference, and how, can you actually look at a person walking down the street and how much can you tell about them? I think that's fascinating, obviously. And I'm also reading The Book of Dust, which is the latest Philip Pullman book of his Dark Materials, which has just come out. So yeah.
Fabulous. So you're bookending your day with reading at night and getting up a little bit earlier in the morning. That's really helping with your mojo.
It is. Yeah. And they're small things, but it makes a big difference. I think that's quite important.
Small, achievable things.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, great. Bree, thank you so much for your time today. That's been just a fabulous conversation. I've learned a huge amount. Hopefully our listeners have too. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, Richard.
Wasn't that just so interesting and useful, full of insight and wisdom? And I hope it really resonates with you. So thank you so much, Bree. Some key takeouts from me. I like the importance of building a support network as an entrepreneur. I absolutely see that myself. How storytelling can help with connection and influence, whether you're a new graduate entering your career or a 30-year industry veteran looking to change careers. And how opening up to strangers can help fire up your mojo. It's amazing what can happen when you listen to stories. So, here is a Mojo challenge for you. This week, go and start a conversation with someone you don't know. So this could be someone in your office you just haven't met before, someone on your commute, or someone in your local coffee shop. See what happens and how it feels before and after, and what you learn. I mentioned the special offer Bree has created for Mojo listeners. So if you'd like your own story card created, go to www.arcstorytelling.com, that's ARC, A-R-C, storytelling.com, and quote Mojo for a 20% discount. More details in the show notes. And remember, if you like this podcast and you'd like more people to hear it, please do subscribe, leave 5 stars, and write a really short but quick and lovely review. That would be great. Oh yes, and please do share out on social so more of your network can hear it too. You can see more of what I'm up to on Instagram at Mojo Richard. Plenty of lovely pictures from Ibiza this week as I've been on some fabulous walks. Next week on the Mojo Podcast, my guest is Vicky Connerty, an award-winning playwright and cancer survivor. It's an incredibly inspiring story of creating positivity in the face of adversity and finding light in the dark. So, until next week, I hope your mojo continues to flow.